did not think I was going to cry in this interview.
I'd say one of the most influential musical artifacts, and this is embodied in a person in this case, is the drummer Brian Blade. He's an incredible jazz drummer who, like, the way I would describe his playing is that he's like not even playing the drums, he's just playing music, and it's just pure expression. And that's like something that I would say has really influenced my playing and my outlook on like finding joy and like making music. So yeah.
So one of my most cherished musical artifacts in the form of like ephemera, in the form of memory for me, is thinking back on what it was like growing up when my grandparents who lived with us used to, my grandfather used to sing these Muslim hymns. They were sort of delivered in this very reedy, kind of like nasal voice that I've seldom heard anywhere else, including other people who sing those same spiritual songs. And he kind of had this way of pulsating as he would sing them, so you'd like get the sense of where his rhythm was. And for a long time, I couldn't sleep unless he was there singing those songs for me. And he was hospitalized at some point when I was a kid, and I would call him on the phone and he would sing to me from the hospital so that I could go to sleep. And I think that the sound of his voice, which had traveled by that point to 3 different continents, and carried with it the weight of incredible life experience, is something that I try to like take with me and channel every time that I make music, because it was unadorned and honest and personal, and that's like what all of my favorite music has in it.
It does make me wonder about firsts and the correlation between firsts and favorites. So maybe I'll answer the question more like some of my favorite firsts.
Sure.
Some of my favorite firsts with respect to experiencing music. The first tape I ever stole, which was Licensed to Ill, was Beastie Boys. I stole it from my brother, so it wasn't really stealing, I guess. But men probably listened to that record like 150 times, back when you listened to records more than once. I just picture my like little kid self, like, memorized with all these memorized Beastie Boys lyrics on my way to soccer practice. The way that music, and that music in particular, tangled up with my childhood experience is really funny to think about now, looking back. The first record that was ever given to me is still one of my favorite records of all time, which is Joni Mitchell Blue. It was given to me by a girl, and it was a parting gift on one of my moves when I was a child. When I was a kid, I wasn't a child, but I guess I was like in middle school. And I remember crazily, like, just immediately loving it. And I think that's kind of, it's kind of wild to think about how my middle school self loved it, and so does my middle-aged self, like it says something about that music and how it just ate right into me and stayed there. Recently I listened to it again for the first time and realized I knew like almost all of the lyrics by heart, having not listened to it for maybe like a decade, and I'm like, no, it's still there. It's still like deeply a part of me. So
a recent encounter with a literary artifact, which I'm thinking of in this case in the form of an experience or a confrontation almost with literature, or with a literary or poetic artifact, came to me just a couple weeks ago when we attended the Big Ears Festival in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I stumbled into a room to join Ryan and my fiance Nina, who were listening to the very, very brilliant Saul Williams read and recite poetry, and the performance, if you want to call it that, it really was like more of a community meeting in a way. It had taken on this form where people from the audience were just asking questions or making requests or pronouncements as they saw fit, and it became so clear to me in that situation that Saul Williams was just like living and breathing poetry, and there was no separation between who he was and the presence that he embodied in that room and the lines that, the verses that he was reciting. And he would just snap straight from an interaction with an audience member about a subject into a poem about that subject, as though the poem was being written in that room on the spot about that moment and speaking directly to that moment. And it taught me a lot about liveness and presence, and that's something that I think I'll always remember.
This is sort of a cheat. This answer is sort of a cheat, but one of the pieces of writing that has had the most impact on me recently is the script for a movie that we just finished scoring and that just came out, called Everything Everywhere All at Once. And I have such a vivid first memory of encountering this script, because it came at me from so many surprising angles, and was one of these things, like I described with listening to Dylan for the first time, where I was completely confused by it and I didn't really know what to do with it. And then over the course of the last 3 years, that assemblage of words came to have so much meaning in my life, and guided so many of my creative decisions, and so many hours of so many days. And so it's kind of cheating, but I would say that that's one of my favorite pieces of literature.
A favorite piece of literature for me is Opus by Satoshi Kon, who is an amazing anime director and graphic novelist, and it's a book that was originally serialized, but the publication that it was a part of, that it was being serialized in, got canceled, so it was never finished, which is both frustrating but I think also appropriate. So highly recommend that to anyone. If anyone's watched the movie Paprika, which is one of my favorite movies, it's by Satoshi Kon. So yeah. For me, I'd say the music community in New York City. I know it's not like an organization, but that's just where I've found the most like-minded people in my life. So
when I was a kid, I got into music in part because it was a way of reconciling all these different aspects of what I felt like my identity was, which included the culture that my parents brought to this country when they immigrated here. It included the culture that I encountered when I was in school, with my friends, and I was always sort of searching without visible precedents for someone who had the experience that I was having. I was searching for a way to kind of piece it all together and make it make some kind of sense, and music became almost like a form of therapy for me, because it was a way of reconciling all these different aspects of my experience into something that felt like a coherent and personal way of expressing that. And a big step in that direction came when I was in high school and I started discovering the history of the American music that people call jazz, and hearing all of these incredible artists who, you know, you could hear 2 seconds of somebody's sound and just be able to tell that it was them. You know, and all of that personality and that sort of like what felt like honesty expressed in sound was evident in that expression. And for a long time, I experienced that as a listener to recordings, and I started to experience it in my local community, but I always thought of that the community that had given rise to that music that I was hearing as being this thing that was, you know, this larger than life kind of form. And when I was in college, I got to meet this man who would end up bringing that community to life for me, who his name was Billy Hart, and he's one of the great drummers on this planet. He played with Miles Davis and Herbie Hancock and Stan Getz and all that. He's just a living, breathing embodiment of what the music is, and also what it could, you know, he holds the keys to what it could be tomorrow. And getting to be around him and experience his sense of openness after having been a part of so many of the periods of the music's development, you know, his openness to what the future might hold, and almost preoccupation with what the future might hold, and his you know, mentorship and guidance to me, and his embrace of me into that fold, was something that I never thought I would experience, and that continues to inspire me to this day.
I think without a doubt, the group of people who have taught me most about community is my band.
Aww.
Did not think I was gonna cry in this interview. Sorry.
Take it back.
Yeah, so my band. Love you guys.
Love you too, man. Love you.